I think we can start off with the radar 24 hours ago. It's been a quiet period here in the U.S., and let's roll this through the afternoon. You can see lots of afternoon storms get going in the southeast, and this is why you got to be careful flying through Atlanta in the summertime, because they really do get it. Lots of thunderstorm activity, and what you'll see here is a big MCS developing off the northwest Florida coast. You can see that coming together right about there. That's going to be about 3 a.m. Also, last evening, let's roll this back. We had some high base showers get going around Denver and east of Cheyenne, and those moved southeast through Kit Carson, Burlington, and moving into the Oklahoma Panhandle. And by this morning, about 4 a.m., lots of showers from Woodward to Amarillo down to Childress and the Cap Rock. Of course, a lot of that has dissipated already. But it kind of shows that we're getting into a weak northwest flow situation with that subtropical high being way out to the west. This is certainly a good time to take a look at the moisture fields. Things are being dominated east of the Rockies by a high pressure area over the Great Lakes, and that runs actually all the way out to New York. So everywhere south of that has got a northerly component. You can see those winds blowing north to south. And that gives us a very narrow area of return flow on the high plains right about there. But one thing that you notice is that's not tapping the Gulf at all. See the purple out here? These are 70s dew points, and those aren't going nowhere. Looks like a lot of the storms that we had there in Colorado being fed by a feeble supply of 40s dew points, and that's the reason they never really came together as a well-developed, organized MCS. So let's see what's going to happen to that moisture supply. We'll just run the GFS a little bit forward, and there is some improvement. And I'm seeing these weird problems with the GFS pumping up the moisture at 0Z. That's when we should have lower dew points due to mixing. GFS has 70s dew points up there in Minnesota, so I'd take that with a grain of salt there. But overall, it does look like some moisture is flowing northward. Let's look at the precipitable water, and that'll give us less of a two-dimensional picture. Now, this does show that there is probably some better moisture just off the surface coming into the Childress area. Let me set a forecast sounding on that area and see what's going on. Yeah, there it is. Mid and upper level moisture. That's enough to get some elevated storms going. What I'm doing here is I'm evaluating the moisture supply, clicking in this little ribbon here across Texas, and we see that it does have a lot of depth, but it's very weak. 50s dew points for the most part, and there is some elevated moisture. So it is going to be slim pickings, and these systems out in the Gulf, those are not going to help things because those are going to create an offshore wind component and pull the moisture south. Now for today, we do see two tropical depressions, one out there in the Caribbean, that's 14, and then of course 13. These are the same two tropical cyclones we were tracking yesterday. There's the Pathon Tropical Depression 14 between Nicaragua and Jamaica. That's heading westward, and it's going to slowly recurve across the Yucatan and up into the western Gulf. Now, the discussion from NHC does mention conditions being ideal for strengthening with vertical shear less than 10 knots. Now, I'm not too sure where they're getting that because we do have very strong troughing in the Gulf, polar front jet well down to the south, 60 knots across the Yucatan and up into the northwestern Caribbean. And scrolling this ahead into the weekend, that shear is going to be in place for quite a while, at least until Sunday. And there's a look at the 850 to 200 millibar shear. It's definitely detrimental up there in the Yucatan. And then over the next day, tomorrow morning, it's going to look like this. And then for Saturday morning, it will look like this. Now, I guess our system will be on the fringe of that, but I am pretty concerned about the amount of shear there. Now, if we look at the 850 to 300 millibar winds, that's through a slightly shallower layer, and that's what's going to be associated mostly with your weaker tropical cyclones. It does look a little bit better there, and let's go ahead into Friday morning. There's the picture. Yeah, pretty much from Belize northward, detrimental shear south of that, it looks pretty good. So maybe there's just this very narrow region of favorable wind shear. And then on Saturday, looking like that. This is all from the GFS model, and this is plotted thanks to wind grids. That's created by Jeff Krob, and he's a NOAA meteorologist who has checked in occasionally on Forecast Lab. I don't know if he's still with us, but he was with us during the 2015 to 2018 run. Tropical Depression 13, we were looking at a path kind of like that yesterday. Let's see what we're at for today. No real change on that path either. Looks like that's going well north of Puerto Rico, north of Dominica, and pretty much straight for southern Florida. So here they're talking about light to moderate vertical wind shear over the next few days. Here's the 850 to 200 millibar wind shear tomorrow morning. And yeah, it does look favorable out ahead of the tropical cyclone, which is right over here. And we've got to not pay too much attention to this wind because that's being influenced by the cyclone itself. We're looking at the environment well out ahead of it and around it. And let's see what it looks like for Saturday. So here's the wind shear, 850 to 200 on Saturday morning. And yeah, a very large area of favorable wind shear profiles. And then going right ahead to Sunday morning, there's what the shear looks like. The storm appears to be right about there. So this storm, yeah, that's certainly favorable for continued development as that heads towards Florida. And we're expecting that to ease up into hurricane strength about 48 to 72 hours from now. And we should have a Category 1 storm later in the weekend. Here's the 250 millibar chart. Up in the upper troposphere, this is kind of like the master plan of air masses and weather systems. Very strong jet out there in the Pacific off the coast of Washington and Oregon. And this is a little bit further south than what we had over the past couple of days. That looks to be almost coming onshore in the Pacific Northwest there around Washington. The subtropical high, well, looks like that's centered around northwestern Arizona, right about there. And we got the anticyclonic flow coming around that, and that's shoving a polar front jet all the way from the Dakotas down into Texas and all the way down to Corpus Christi. So yeah, you can see that polar front jet running about like that and going all the way down into the Gulf and then coming out the other side around Florida and up into Virginia. And that's helping to support some of that storm activity that we have just off the coast of northwestern Florida. Then a bit of a split flow pattern up in Canada there. Northern polar front jet up there in the central prairies down to Ontario. And then the main polar vortex, well, at least one segment there in Quebec. In the southwestern U.S., heat lows are dominating the picture. You can see lots of 100-degree readings. One little cluster of heat lows right around El Paso, and you can see the convergence of the wind field into that feature. Also another one out there near Needles, Las Vegas, 106, and that's the feature right there. Also, we've got those wildfires out there in California. You can see the obstructed visibilities there. Lots of IFR conditions being indicated from Sacramento down to Fresno and up into the pretty much all the way up to Winnemucca, Nevada. Let's look at the satellite and get a better look at that. There it is. Well, before I zoom in on California, we can see lots of shower activity in the central Rockies there with that progressive west-northwest flow through that region. But down to the south, just not enough moisture to support storms except on the Mogollon Rim and the higher regions of the Four Corners area. But then California, you see all those smoke plumes. You can see numerous fires up there northwest of Sacramento and then scattered around the San Francisco and Stockton area. One of our viewers wrote in. I'm not too sure he wants to be named, but I'll just read the content. He mentions, as he expected, the marine layer had developed along the immediate coast, which cranked up the northwest wind in the fire zone. Gusts up to 30 knots, and that's pushed the fires over the containment lines and forced the main artery, Highway 80, between San Francisco and Sacramento to close. At the same time, 6,500 people told to evacuate immediately. There are several new hot flare-ups occurring. People are panicking and making the situation even worse. This is just getting started up too. The biggest threat is Vacaville, where 20,000 homes could burn. And Vacaville, that's going to be in this area right here. That's near Travis Air Force Base. We're not going to go into too much detail on this because, we're not a news source, but there it is. You can see it on the satellite imagery. Now, elsewhere on the map, Texas. Got that high pressure pushing cool air into the Lone Star State. It looks like our front is roughly from Victoria up to San Angelo, and I can see what might be the start of a dry line right around the San Angelo to Lane Tree area. And that's dividing these 60s dew points from the 40s further to the northwest. In the northwestern U.S., pretty seasonal temperatures, a little bit warm out in the high plains there up to Saskatchewan, where we have a few 90s, and the cold front lurking up to the north there in Alberta and near Saskatoon. Out on the plains itself, we got that trough there. That's mostly a heat low there, pretty much outlining the area of above 90-degree readings. And the satellite looking like this, and it's showing some of that smoke from California has worked its way all the way towards Idaho and Montana, and starting to flow around the ridge into Wyoming, and even looks like all the way to Denver. In the northeastern U.S., the cold air advection pattern is starting to shut down a little bit, but we do have a front in northern Michigan. You can see some showers going up in the UP all the way up to northern Wisconsin, and it looks like that's moving towards the east-southeast there. Down to the south, under the influence of that high pressure, which is over Pennsylvania and New York and moving offshore. And let's take a look at that. And there's the patterns with our frontal system up there in Michigan moving east-southeast, and the high pressure across New York and Pennsylvania. So not much to say about that, but you can see the dew points are definitely lower than the 60s and 70s that we often see this time of year. There's the map across the southeastern U.S. and the surface systems looking like this. Definitely on the mild side, and you've got to go all the way to Texas to get into the upper 90s, and that's around Austin and San Antonio. Now, because we do have that trough in the upper levels, remember that upper level trough and the wind's going around it, I might be tempted a little bit to put a frontal system way out here. You remember how we talk about troughs and downstream ridges and how we usually find the frontal system out between them along the jet stream itself. So I might be looking for an orientation kind of like that of the frontal systems. Now, could that be supported by the surface data? Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, you could go possibly something like that, dividing these upper 80s and very humid air from the slightly more worked over air to the north. So yeah, that's certainly a possibility. And the other thing that I would like to look at is the thickness. However, what I'm seeing is very weak thickness patterns out in the Gulf. So I might be tempted to go just more by the surface indications that I see on the surface chart. A lot of times your upper level features, your jet streams, they can be influenced by stuff going on in the mid levels and the upper levels, and that could very well be what's happening here. One way we can illustrate all this is to go up to 925, look for thermal gradients. Don't really see much. Let's go up to 850. Now at 850 we're starting to see a little bit of a gradient. Warm air right there across Florida, cooler air to the north. Let's go up to 700. Not really seeing a whole lot. Maybe a little bit of a gradient right in here. And let's go up to 500. Now we're really starting to see a gradient. You can see the warm air right there and the cool air across Louisiana. So I think this is an example of where your upper level patterns may be associated mostly by mid-level systems and may not match up too well with the surface charts. Alright, it's time to get this all wrapped up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is the Forecast Lab, and we'll be back tomorrow for our Friday edition. Hopefully we'll see you there. Take care and have a great evening. Bye-bye.